prime thing is you have to win.
There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Mark, settle down a little bit.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Just Win podcast. That's Tashan Reed. I'm Ted Nguyen, and the season is finally here. We've waited months and months and months. We got through the preseason. We're here. The Raiders are going to kick off their 2025 season against the Patriots in New England. We have a revenge game factor. Josh McDaniels is playing the team that fired him while he was trick-or-treating with his kids. It's all there. It's exciting. Jacoby Myers looks like he's playing. And speaking of Jacoby Myers, he did speak today. Could you fill us in on what he said and the update with his situation?
Yeah, so we already knew he had been practicing still despite, making a trade request last week over a contract dispute and figured that he was, going to play this week, but we just confirmed it, with him being present again today. And they opened up locker room before practice today. They usually wait till after. And he was one of the guys sitting in there and, naturally, first guy that media wanted to talk to. And I thought he was really candid. I mean, he, for first off, he sort of just explained like why he didn't go the holdout route. He said it's really out of loyalty to his teammates, the bond that he feels with the guys that have been here. They do have a lot of new faces, but guys, that have been here for a few years in the receiver room and, even, on the offense in general. And then on the other side of the ball, he felt an obligation to continue to play for them. He said if it wasn't for those relationships and it was a different type of situation, he probably would have gone the holdout route. And then he sort of gave us some more context for just the timing of, his trade requests. He said he really sort of expected to get approached about, getting a deal done this offseason, just coming off the year that he had, his best year of his career, hit 1,000 yards for the first time. He's only going to be 29 years old this season. He's still in his prime and has been healthy for most of his career. And so he sort of anticipated, getting an extension. And then when it didn't come, it came as a surprise to him. And so, engaged the team trying to negotiate a new deal. And he just realized they weren't seeing eye to eye. And it seems like it pretty, shocked him, given, how he played last year. And, in the backdrop of that, we've seen the receiver market, explode, this offseason. I mean, you've seen about 10 different receivers get deals that are worth $20 million or more. And some of those receivers, like obviously he's not on the level of like, let's say Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or some of these other players at the top of the market. But you've seen some guys around his range get some pretty nice deals, whether it's Cortland Sutton or, Stephon Diggs at this point in their career. They're pretty similar to their players. Those guys got in excess of $20 million per year. And, Jacoby making 10.5 this year, like that's a solid number. It's not a negligible amount of money, but it's definitely below his market rate when, what it would be if he had been a free agent this year, obviously. And with him going into the final year as you do, I think he's not only looking for a raise over what he's making now, but he's also looking for some sort of, long-term commitment from the team going into the future. So, I think it's one of those weird situations where like you can completely understand his perspective, but you also get why the Raiders are hesitant to make that kind of commitment. I mean, they did spend a second round pick on Jack Besh, who, as we talked about, he has a lot of overlap with Jacoby Myers. And if, they obviously believed a lot in Besh to draft him that highly. And so if you think he's going to progress into being a guy that can replace Myers, like it doesn't really make sense to also extend Myers. And so you got to you understand the team perspective as well. And so it's a situation where there's not really somebody who's wrong here, but I do think you have to give a lot of credit to Jacoby for continuing to be present with the team and play with the team, because as Raiders fans know very well from the whole Devontae Adams debacle last year, like that's definitely not always guaranteed to be the case.
Yeah, and just looking around the league, like he could definitely have made the situation a lot uglier if he wanted to. I mean, you look at the Niners and what they went through with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and then this year, Juwan Jennings, who is actually a very similar situation to Jacoby Myers. Both are number 2 type of receivers. Both are looking for similar types of raises. Um, all offseason, Juwan Jennings hasn't practiced, and some of that might have to do with the calf. Some of it might have to do with it being contract related. But as we know, skipping training camp isn't nothing. Like if you skip training camp, these receivers have started the season extremely slow, not in the same page as their quarterback, and it really hurts the offense early on. So for Jacoby Myers to practice with the team, and even on the day that his trade request was denied, he was still practicing. So that just says a lot about how much he values the team and how much he wants to be there for his teammates. So, I mean, I think even if they can't come to a conclusion, I would like to see the Raiders just give him a raise this year. I mean, he's making, they're getting great value with him at $11 million, but they could up his salary a little bit. I mean, they're spending the fifth least amount of money on offense in the entire league and the fourth least in defense. So they have plenty of cap space. I would like to extend them and reward them a little bit, even if they can't come to terms on a long term extension.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that would, like you said, completely like ease things. I think like as much as it is about the raise issue, it's also about the long term security. But it would help, you know what I mean? Like to kind of show a good faith, and not just for Jacoby. Even if he ends up, let's say, to give him a raise, kind of similar to like the Hendrickson deal, and he still leaves this offseason, like that's business. But it would send us a pretty good message, I think, to the rest of the locker room that you're not just gonna leave players high and dry if they prove themselves and are looking for that extension. And I guess the counter they would have is like, we did that with Max Crosby and Colton Miller. I think Max Crosby is like, I mean, obviously you extend Max Crosby. Colton Miller was one where it's like, okay, I mean, they could extend him, could not extend him. So the team could be up the position that like we already show we're willing to do that, but Besh's presence makes the situation different. So again, I could see it from both perspectives, but I think if he was willing to make it uglier, like not play or sit out or something like that, I think he, kind of have a better shot of getting that raise. Whereas if he's just going to go about business as usual, I feel like the team, they don't really have a great reason to. You know what I mean? Like it sounds kind of cold, but like NFL teams aren't really in the business of just giving money just because. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Jennings tried that with the Niners, and it's pretty much the same situation where he's not going to get an extension. They're not going to give him a raise, and he's going to have to play on that deal. And he skipped out on the entire training camp and preseason. So not always, but it does push push the buttons a little bit, and it gets things moving forward. But Myers chose the path that he chose, and we'll see what happens to it. I don't personally. I feel like just because something doesn't happen right before the season doesn't mean it won't happen. I think historically there's a better chance, but I still think there might be a chance something happens as the season progresses.
Yeah, I mean, it could. I just feel like I don't know what would change with the Raiders' position, unless Jacoby just starts playing like, out of this world. You know what I mean? Like if he, is on pace to have like a 1,500-yard season or something like that, I think that could change the math potentially. But we'll see. And I think another reason why like probably especially this week, like Jacoby wouldn't want to miss his game. This is his first time playing in New England since coming over from the Patriots, who were kind of had the shoe was on their foot, with him leaving there. They basically chose Juju Smith Schuster, gave him the same contract instead of bringing back Jacoby Myers, and he took that personally. I remember he tweeted about it, saying cold world. So I think he's a little fired up to also go back to New England and play in that stadium. So I'm sure that's part of it too.
Yeah, you hear that, Jacoby Myers? You could shut two teams up this week if you have a 150-yard game, 2 touchdown game this week. All right, let's talk about the corner position. We know Eric Stokes is starting at one spot, and the unofficial depth chart came out, but pretty much got confirmed by the Raiders today that Caillou Blue Kelly won the position battle over Darian Porter, and if his hamstring holds up, and he said it's 100%, he's going to be a starting corner this week.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, he did miss that last preseason game with a hamstring injury. It didn't seem to be too serious, but Pete Carroll said he had a history with that same hamstring in the past, and so they want to be cautious with it. But I mean, I think it's kind of still a surprise and rise for Caillou Kelly. Like he's not really somebody that any of us were thinking much about, making a roster, let alone being a starter. When this off season, OTAs got started, and even early in the training camp, it was really late in the training camp that he started to come on strong. And I think he hasn't played much in game action, but he is a more experienced player than Darian Porter. I think he's a more complete cornerback at this point in his career, given he's a more physical player and a more willing tackler. And isn't as raw, given that he's been playing the position longer. His ceiling isn't as high as Porter, obviously, and I still think long term the aim is for Porter to be the starter one day. But at least early on in the season, it seems like they went with the more experienced option. And I still wouldn't be surprised if this is a spot we talked about it. Like this could very well be a situation where they rotate, as soon as the first game of the season or as the season goes on, you see Porter work in more and more. And like by the end of the season, he ends up being the starter. So I don't think this is anything that's set in stone. But at least just to start the season, that's why they're rolling with Caillou.
Yeah, didn't Pete Carroll say that there's going to be a rotation in the game last week, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly?
yeah, I think it was either him or Spytek. I can't remember which one. But one of them said something like that, which I think it just makes sense. Like obviously, if one is just vastly superior over the other, you roll with that one. But they're decently the same level in terms of where they are right now. So you might as well see, is there somebody that stands apart from the other one? If not, then keep the rotation going. But ideally, you hope that one of them separates themselves at some point, just because it's not really ideal to be rotating quarterbacks mid game.
Yeah, and for Porter, it's about getting experience. Like he needs those reps, but at the same time, he's a bit of a tackling liability out there. So I'm sure that's what's really stopping them for just giving him a ton of reps and letting him play out there. And Kelly's a much better tackler at this point in time. And you might, in passing situations, who knows? You might see Kelly bump out to nickel, and you might see Porter outside just so you can have true corners out there instead of Chin playing big nickel out there. So that's a possibility as well. All right, so let's get into the game. It the Patriots obviously did not finish the season with a very strong record last year, one of the worst teams in the league last year. But you can make the argument that they're one of the teams that has made the most improvements. I mean, they made an upgrade at head coach, bringing in Mike Vrabel, who's a very steady presence and has a proven track record in the league. They signed guys like Carlton Davis. They're getting Christian Barmore back. This is an improved team, so it's not a Patriots team that should be taken lightly. Drake May is coming into his second year at quarterback, and he was a high draft pick as well. And I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. Let's start with with what we're watching when the Raiders have the ball.
Yeah, I think it all starts with the offensive line for me. And I know we've it's kind of like beating a dead horse, but I think that's really the key to the offense this season. I think they have, made a significant upgrade at offensive coordinator, quarterback, running back. They've beefed up their receiver room, in the past week by adding Amari Cooper. Have arguably the best tight end in the league in Brock Bowers and one of the better number two tight ends in the league in Michael Mayer. The real question is, can they block? Like, are they going to be able to run block this season after being one of the worst teams in the league last season in that area? And then can they protect Geno Smith? And, I think this Patriots, defensive front, they have some interesting pieces there. You mentioned, Barmore coming back from, his health situation last year, adding Milton Williams, Keon White, old familiar face, Robert Spillane, even as somebody that gets into the mix up front, blitzing in the pass game, in addition to what he does in the run game. And so, Patriots have a pretty solid front, and Mike Vrabel is known for, getting pretty exotic on that side of the ball. So it'll be a nice test for the offensive line this week, and I think that's really going to be the key, especially in the game on the road, first game of the season. You kind of want to set the tone, and that group is how you do it. And so, um, I think the group kind of started to show some improvement, towards the end of the preseason, but like it's still the preseason, so I don't know how much stock I want to put into that. That's still a unit I gotta see it to believe it from, just because they were pretty rough last year and they didn't really change much coming into this year. Like all five players in the starting lineup were on the team last year, so it's betting a lot on the coaching staff developing those guys the past year. Colton Miller getting healthier, and then being able to scheme around any weaknesses they still have, but this will be our first time really seeing what they're all about over the course of a full game.
Yeah, and that interior was really get tested with Parham, Meredith, and JPJ, because Christian Barmore, Pete, before he got hurt, he was really ascending up into that like elite tier of defensive tackles. So I don't know where he'll be health wise. I think reading the reports and things, he's close to 100%. He looks like the same player he was, and if that's the case, then you're going against a very, very good defensive tackle, and then you pair that with the biggest. I believe he was the biggest free agent signing in this class, Melvin Williams, who was a beast for the Eagles down the stretch, especially in the playoff and Super Bowl run. Extremely good pass rushing defensive tackle that put up elite type of numbers in a short stint. On the outside, they're pretty good, but I don't think they're nearly as talented on the outside. Harold Landry's an older player that can still be very effective. He's going to be rushing against DJ Glaze on the right side, so that's something to watch out for. We want to see if DJ Glaze is making that step up like we expect them to after having a pretty good rookie season, and obviously the staff is putting a lot of faith on him. And on the left side, I think actually Chason is the starting defensive end, a former Raider who signed with the Patriots. So from all the reports, he's had a phenomenal summer. He's looked really good, and he's taken Keon White's starting spot on the outside. So he'll be rushing against Colton Miller. I don't think I'd be too worried about that. That matchup, I feel like Miller is probably going to do pretty well, even though I think Chason is probably going to be a pretty good player. So we'll see how they block up front. We didn't see a lot of 12 personnel during the preseason, but I expect to see a ton of 12 personnel during the game. I mean, it just makes sense. The Raiders don't have a lot of great receivers. They have their strength in their tight ends with Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. And 12 personnel, you have to be able to run the ball effectively to get the matchups you want, or else they're just going to put sub personnel out there. You don't get great matchups. Even though Brock Bowers can beat a variety of different types of defenders, but it's going to be interesting to see if Christian Gonzalez, their best corner, doesn't play, and he did practice today, so he's legitimately questionable to play in this game. And I think if he does play, they're gonna put Christian Gonzalez on Brock Bowers just because the Raiders don't have a receiver that really worries them, on the outside. So on passing down, second and long, third down situations, I would expect to see Christian Gonzalez on Brock Bowers if he plays. Um, do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, like it depends on where the Raiders line them up. I don't know how flexible the Patriots are with moving Gonzalez, but like as we know, like Bowers lines up in the slot a ton. He does line up outside. He lines up as a traditional tight end. So I mean, the Patriots are comfortable just having Gonzalez travel, whether he's lined up as a nickel or in the box or wherever. Then I could see it. I don't know if I would see it like a full time thing. Like if he's on the outside or in the slot, maybe they do that, but it's kind of hard to imagine Gonzalez line up like in the box over the top of Bart Bowers. So it probably won't be 100% rate, but I think that's their best matchup for him. Like I would have said Kyle Duggar, but I mean he's in the doghouse with them for reasons that I don't really fully understand. But I think he would probably be a good matchup for Bowers, but it seems like he's kind of out of the mix for them now. So Gonzalez is definitely the best matchup if he's healthy, which is like you said, a big question. I do think we'll see the Raiders use 12 personnel pretty often. Um, I think they don't necessarily have to as much now that they added Cooper. Like it's fine if they're in 11 personnel a little bit more. I feel better about their receiver depth. But if Michael Mayer legitimately has like gotten back to, kind of that form that they saw, or the other regime saw when they drafted him out of Notre Dame back in college when he was considered to be, one of the top tight end prospects. If he's up to that level, then I think it makes sense. But they're not going to just do it just to do it. Because like while they were a team that used 12 personnel more than anybody last year, like you said, they really just weren't effective when they did it. Part of that was not having Mike Mayer around, but the other part was not being able to run the ball. And so kind of still ties in with the offensive line. Like, can this team run the ball? I think that'll dictate pretty much everything else, in terms of how the offense is structured and how they operate, moving forward.
Yeah, and if Gonzalez doesn't play, then they're gonna have to send a lot of hard bracket type of double teams towards Bowers. Just I don't think they have anybody that could really cover him one on one. They don't have that body type to cover him. I think Carlton Davis is physical, but I don't think he could hang with Brock Bowers as far as him being a route runner. Um, and they're a team that wants to play a lot of man coverage. I think they're going to either play a lot of man or play a lot of quarters. And where I think the Raiders can really attack them is have your 12 personnel out there and let Geno control the game. Give him two play calls. If the defense has lighter bodies out there, give them a play call to run the ball. If they have their base defense out there, give him a play call to be able to change it to a pass if he needs to. I also think Ashton Genty could really eat as far as it being in a passing game because, like I mentioned, they don't have linebackers that can cover very well. I think Christian Spillane is a good zone defender, but I don't think he stands a chance if he's going to play man coverage on Ashton Genty. And we didn't see Genty get used as a receiver a lot during the preseason, but in practice, in training camp, he was lining out in the slot, running legitimate routes. So to me, I think this is a matchup where Genty should get the ball in the passing game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, like Spillane, he's really took a big step forward in coverage the last couple of years, but mostly he's in zone. Like if they're manning him up with Ashton Genty, I give the advantage to Genty for sure. And I think just in general on the offense, like they were super vanilla in the preseason, which we talked about, but I think they're gonna really, of course, season's here now. They're gonna let it loose and utilize everything that Chip Kelly has in his back pocket. So I think we'll see a lot more Genty getting involved in the pass game, particularly if they do have some issues running the ball.
Yep. All right, let's talk about what we're looking for when the Patriots have the ball. So Patriots, Josh McDaniels offense looks like they want to be an outside zone team. A ton of play action, screens, all those things. What are the matchups you're going to be watching for?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of, I know it's very centered on running the ball, but I think how this Raiders defense stops the run is going to be huge. I think that's probably the most concerning aspect of the defense. Like we talked about the secondary a lot and like the cornerback situation when you look at it on paper, it is pretty precarious, but I do think their pass rush could be, better this year. With Max Crosby being back at full strength. Malcolm Kuntz seems to be working back in form from that torn ACL, and they're also hoping to get more out of Tyree Wilson as well in year three. Like it seems like he started to put it together and kind of hitting his groove. And so I think the pass rush, if it is as good as they hope for, and also you got to mention Adam Butler working from the inside as well. I think that could probably mitigate some of the issues in the secondary. But the run defense is something that it's like, like I don't really know what the answer is here because they don't really have a great answer to replace what Christian Wilkins brought to the table as a run defender at defensive tackle. I think at linebacker, while they do have some guys that have a history of being stout run defenders like a Landon Roberts, the overall quality of that group kind of worries me a little bit. And I just think their run defense is something that's going to be an area of concern for them this season. And Patriots have a pretty loaded backfield with Ramondre Stevenson, backing up. Or I guess we'll see how it goes, but he could be backing up, the rookie Treveon Henderson that they drafted, who he looks pretty damn good to me. And so they kind of have a two-headed monster in the backfield. And then Drake May, it's not like he's Lamar Jackson, but he's a threat as a runner, and you got to respect him in the quarterback run game as well. And Josh McDaniels loves to run the ball, as we know, and I think they're going to test the Raiders up front in that area in terms of the spine of their defense. And so, like the Patriots receivers, like, I mean, I don't know, that I think Diggs will see like how he bounces back from the ACL, and kind of where he is in his recovery, but they don't really move me, in terms of their receiving options. So I think the Patriots approach to this game is going to be very oriented on the run. And so that's really what I'm watching is how the Raiders handle that.
Yeah, I think they need to have a good game plan against the quarterback run game, just because, like you mentioned, Drake May is pretty athletic. Josh McDaniels actually does have experience drawing up option plays and that stuff. He had a really actually pretty interesting offense, and he had Cam Newton as quarterback. So I would not be surprised at all if they decide to throw that curveball. So the Raiders have to have a game plan against that. But if I think the good news is they wanna be an outside zone team, and I think the Raiders are actually pretty good at stopping outside zone, as we saw against the Niners, because they have stout run defenders on the edge. Max Crosby is one of the best run defenders in the league, and Tyree Wilson's actually he's a monster on the edge as far as run defense. You can say what you want about his ability to rush the passer, but he good luck trying to block him as a tight end trying to block outside zone. And we talked about this a ton. Like they're young defensive tackles, Tonka Hemingway, Pegoose, and I'm blanking on the name right now with Jonah.
Thomas Booker.
Yeah, Thomas Booker.
John.
Yeah, they all flashed in the preseason. So we'll see how that translates into the regular season. I don't think the Patriots have a very good offensive line. They have two rookies starting, Will Campbell, their first round draft pick, and then they have Jared Wilson starting at left guard. Bradbury is not a very good center. He's a little below average. Morgan Moses is a fine right tackle. And Mike Onwenu is he's an okay guard. So um, a lot of questions on the front. I think the Raiders should be able to. I don't think this run game is that big of a threat, but to me, the biggest threat is probably Drake May as a runner. Um, What worries me is Henderson as a receiver. Their second round running back they got out at Ohio
Mhm.
State. Um, the biggest questions for me with this linebacker group, how are they going to be able to cover? And we know Josh McDaniels loves to use his running backs in the passing game. It's been a staple in New England forever, and he's going to match up Henderson on Devin White, and we're going to see how they match up. I mean, I almost think if Henderson's on a field, you put Jamal Adams out there at linebacker because I would not want Henderson matched up on Landon Roberts or Devin White.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be, you know, I think Henderson is in the run game too. I'm worried about him, but definitely as a receiver, that's also going to be a tricky matchup for the Raiders linebackers because they're not known for coverage skills. Like Jermaine Pratt is probably I would say pretty firmly he's their best linebacker in coverage. So I think if he's out there, that's probably going to be the matchup for him. Like Jamal Adams, like you said, he's obviously he's as a former safety, he does have coverage skills, but he also got cooked a lot the last couple of years. So at the I don't know how strong his coverage skills are anymore. So
Well, on a running
yeah.
back, I hope he's able to cover a running back, but
Yeah, yeah. I
who
mean,
knows? Who knows? But I think he should be athletic enough to cover a running back. But Henderson is very fast. But
yeah.
we'll see. I think he'll be better covering him than Devin White. I'll say that.
Well, yeah, I just think Jermaine Pratt, I probably would be my answer there. Or kind of overall, but we'll see. I think that's going to be a rotational position for them for sure. Like Landon Roberts seemed to be pretty locked in as a Mike linebacker, but based on the situation, it doesn't seem like they're going to have an issue like subbing those linebackers in and out. So I think they'll be fluid for sure. It's just kind of based on the Patriots. Personnel groupings and I wouldn't be surprised if we see some like two running back formations out of the Patriots, honestly, with Ramondre and Henderson. So um, I'm pretty sure the Raiders will be flexible. I mean, they're going to have to be. Patrick Graham with what they've given him to work with on defense this year. Like they're going to have to get really creative with their personnel groupings and get aggressive with their blitzing and coverage schemes and things of that nature. So I think this is going to be a ton of rotation on the defense this year for sure.
Stephon Diggs is going to be somebody to watch out for. As we know, at his peak, he was one of the best receivers in the league. He's not that guy anymore. But I mean, we talked about the Raiders' issues at outside corner. Um, if Diggs becomes a problem on outside, running curl routes and dig routes and getting deep posts and all those things, that's gonna be something the Raiders have to watch out for. We don't know quite where he is, but with the Raiders' problems at corner, that can be a potential matchup to watch out for. So we'll see how he looks. When the regular season starts.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's talk about. Well, I guess we already talked about a lot of the matchups to watch out for, but what would be your X factor?
I guess one thing on the matchup, like obviously, I think the clear answer, if he plays, is Gonzalez against Brock Bowers. If he
Hmm.
doesn't, I would probably flip to the other side of the ball and go Stephon Diggs against Eric Stokes, which I would assume would be the matchup that they go with there, given kind of the other cornerback spot being rotational. Eric Stokes has a physical talent to match up with Stephon Diggs, but like you mentioned, he's one of the better route runners in the league, and that could be a problem if he can't contain Diggs. So if Gonzalez doesn't play, then that would be the matchup that I think I have the biggest eye on.
Yeah, mine's would be JPJ against Melvin Williams. He could wreck a game from the inside, and I think Raider Nation has a lot of hope for JPJ. So it would be extremely encouraging if he just came out and had an excellent game against a very good interior rusher. And then on the other side of the ball, um, yeah, I would say any linebacker, whoever it is, against Henderson. I think that's gonna be a huge part of the game plan, and they got to figure out a way to cover Henderson. All right, X factors.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm gonna go with Dante Thornton, receiver. I think he's sort of their big play, downfield threat that they have on offense. Like you say Trey Tucker as well, but I think his size kind of limits his ability to be a threat in that area. But the Raiders, they have on the offense a lot of guys that you would key in on. Brock Bowers being the biggest threat. Ashton Genty, being probably the next biggest focus of the defense, I would assume. And so that kind of opens up room for a lot of other guys to get that single coverage, one on one, especially if they're bracketing Bowers because Gonzalez can't play or something of that nature. And so Thornton could be a guy that ends up getting a lot of one-on-ones on the outside, and we've seen with his size and speed, like he can take the top off the defense really at any time, and so that's a matchup that Geno Smith trusts and is willing to take a shot on, and so I'm not saying that Dante's going to get 10 catches this game, but I think he could have like one or two like big catches downfield that really make a big difference for the offense. So I'm going to roll with him.
I'm gonna say Ashton Genty as the receiver. Like I mentioned, there Bowers get a ton of attention on the inside. I just feel like it's such an easy button for the Raiders if they could just pepper Ashton Genty with catches, especially if they can match him up on a linebacker, and he'll get those matchups. And if they're able to do that, it makes the next opponent have to think about that. And I think it just opens us tons of things, and I think it'll make me think that, all right, Chip Kelly knows what he's doing. I think he's becoming a much more game plan specific coach than he was in his first stint as an offensive coordinator. Um, so I would love to see Ashton Genty become a big part of this game plan, especially as a receiver. And it's just an easy way to give him the ball. I mean, who knows what the run blocking is going to look like? But if you want to give him the ball in open space, throw it to him. All right, game predictions. What are we thinking?
I'm gonna go with the Raiders. I think they start the season off on a high note. 24-20 is my prediction. I think while there's a lot of concern about their defense, this Patriots offense that isn't like a particularly scary one to me. And I think they can contain them enough to kind of hold them in check. And offense, as long as the offensive line holds up in a decent way, I think they should be able to get some success against the Patriots back end, particularly if Gonzalez is not 100% or not playing. And so I think that gives them the edge here. I think from a coaching standpoint, it's pretty much a toss up. Like Carroll and Vrabel, got strong coaches on both sides of the ball. Both teams have quality coordinators as well. So I think it'll be pretty much a wash from that standpoint. But I think the difference here is I like the Raiders offense just a little bit more than the Patriots. And I think they edge out a close victory in week 1.
Yeah, I like the Raiders too. I think the Geno Smith is probably the most um, steadying player on the field. I mean, you have Drake May is extremely talented, but he's going to be his first game in this Josh McDaniel system. I think the Raiders are going to do a good job of stopping the Patriots run game. And if they get them into a passing situation, I think just pass rush is going to be able to get home and bother Drake May. And I think there are some answers for the Raiders offense against this Patriots defense. So I'm gonna go Raiders. I'm gonna go Raiders 24-20.
Same
No,
scores. Yeah, you have to just make this dramatic roll out.
I'm gonna give the Raiders defense a little credit. I know there's some questions at corner, but I don't know if Stephon Diggs is gonna be that guy to be able to really threaten them.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess we jinxed him. Or does that still apply without Vic here? Like, is the jinx dead since Vic isn't here anymore? Like,
We'll find out. We'll
I guess
find
we'll,
out.
guess we'll see. I guess we'll see.
We didn't do a seasons prediction yet, so let's get into our season prediction. What do you think?
Yeah, so I started off positive because I feel like I was going to have a negative answer here. Originally, earlier this summer when we did our story for every team predicting the record, I said 8-9. That was before all the Christian Wilkins stuff. So I docked them a win down to 7-10, which, for most fans would be a disappointing season. It's just, I think this team, they have so many holes on both sides of the ball. All three levels of the defense, the offensive line, the depth just isn't there. Like they aren't really well prepared for injuries either. I just don't think the roster is very good. I think, this year is more a foundational year where you're setting the tone for the future. They have a ton of cap space next year. They'll have draft capital and they can, push the team towards being more of a spot to contend for the playoffs next year. But it's kind of just feels like a reset year for them, and so I think they, 7-10, they don't really come close to sniffing the playoffs. Probably the last place team in the division, but it's a little bit of an improvement from last year. I mean, being 4-13, like I don't think they'll be quite as embarrassing as they were at times last season. I think they'll be a pretty consistently competitive team throughout the year, no matter who they're playing against. Like I don't think they're going to have too many of those eyesore games, even if their win-loss record isn't the most impressive. So yeah, I have them finishing 7-10 this year.
All right. I mean, I think on some teams there's like you could put a very good set number range on a team. I feel like this team, the range is a little wider than normal because, like you mentioned, there are some young players, but there are some established players as well. So it all depends on how quickly these young guys can develop. And I liked what I saw from the offensive line in the preseason. I liked what I saw from the defensive line in the preseason. That doesn't always translate, but I'm going to be optimistic, and I'm going to say 10-7. I think Pete Carroll is has his team believing. And I think the difference is Geno Smith. I think there are young players, there are holes, but if you could protect Geno Smith, I think he's going to have a really good year. You wrote a column about that today. And if he does have a really good year, I think he could lead him to 10 wins.
Yeah, man, I do think he'll have a good year. It's just the rest of the team that I have like concerns about, but I respect it. I will agree with you. I do think there's a wider range of outcomes just because they're kind of one of those middle of the pack teams, and that can always swing 2 or 3 wins in the NFL just based on how you handle late game execution. Um, this has been a team that struggled in that area the last couple of years. I think a lot of that was due to coaching, and I do think they've gotten a lot better from a coaching standpoint. And it's also encouraging to see Pete Carroll being an older head coach lean more in analytics and kind of more forward thinking decision making. And so I think if they do have a bunch of close games, I like where they stand in terms of how to handle those. They still might lose them, but I think their process will be a lot more sound in those moments. And so, yeah, I mean, because like I said, I think they're going to be competitive. So they're going to like of those 10 losses I have, like there's probably gonna be a handful of one-score games in there. So if those swing the other ways, like they could get to 10. So I won't say it's impossible. I would be very surprised if they do get to 10. But hey, I mean, Pete Carroll said he's been doing that I know he's exaggerating every year for 20 years. So it'd be the norm for him.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's gonna be a bunch of coin flip games, and in those coin flip games, that Pete Carroll magic and some good play from Geno Smith could swing those games. All right, let's get into fan questions from Joe. Most think the Raiders are going to pound the ball over and over. Do you think there's a chance they let Geno air it out a little bit more than most expect, especially if Christian Gonzalez is out for the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. Like I said, especially if Gonzalez doesn't play, like I think it's that back seven should be attacked in the pass game. I do think they're gonna want to quote unquote establish the run. Like they're gonna have a pretty balanced offensive approach this year. Like, they want to give Genty a bunch of touches, but the Patriots are just loading up 8-man boxes every time. Like I don't think they have any issue with trusting Geno to let it loose out there.
Yeah, I don't think the philosophy for the Raiders is to pound the rock like re- you know at an extremely high rate. I mean, obviously, it's something that they want to be able to establish the run and make the run a threat. But I just don't think that they're built to be a team that really runs the ball at an extremely high rate, and especially early on in the season. I think you're going to see how the offensive line blocks if you get out there and then all of a sudden you can't block for Genty. He's getting 2 yards of carry, then it would not make sense to keep running over and over again. I think in this game, part of the reason why you get Geno Smith is because he's very good at the line of scrimmage. So give him control. If he sees the light box, let him check into a run. If he sees them load the box and an opportunity to throw the ball, let him check into a pass. So they should be balanced, and it should be based on how what the defense is doing. All right, next question. With the addition of Amari Cooper, how do you see the majority of snaps being allocated? Myers and Tucker starting with Cooper and Thornton mixed in? Question mark between Cooper and Thornton. Who will get more burn by Eric Hamilton?
I think at least early on in the season, like especially with Amari Cooper being new, I think they're probably going to stick with that same starting trio that we saw in the preseason with Trey Tucker and Dante Thornton on the outside and Jacoby Myers working from the slot. Um, I think those outside spots are going to be rotational. Like I think Amari Cooper is going to get a ton of snaps in there as well, and also we're going to see Myers line up outside with Brock Bowers lining up in the slot. So it's definitely going to be a fluid position for them. But I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a couple of weeks for like if Amari Cooper is going to end up being a full time starter for him to get up to speed on the system and things like that. So early on, week one, I think I would lean towards expecting them to, stick with the group that they've had.
Yeah, I think. I think Amari Cooper will have a package of plays available for him. They said they wanted to make him part of the game plan, but I think it'll be more specialized. Like if it's second and long or a third down situation, they'll have him in, but in regular downs and if the offense is on schedule, I feel like it'll probably be Thornton. So I would see I think it's gonna be a package of Amari Cooper with that starting group that's been pretty much out there the whole training camp. All right, next question. Do you think the defense will send more pressure to try and play to the strengths of the younger corners? They may be inexperienced, but we definitely have speed at the cornerback position from the White Wolf.
Yeah, I think they gotta be aggressive this year, right? Like, I think, given their defensive personnel, like, they can't be conservative and sit back, or they're just gonna get picked apart and work down the field, and so you have to try to be disruptive, create turnovers, create negative plays for offense, and really the only way this unit is gonna do that is by being aggressive, so I think they're gonna blitz a lot this year. I don't think it's gonna be like, as crazy as, like, Brian Flores, with what he was doing with the Vikings, when they didn't really have great personnel on defense, but something similar, I think that's really the way to go about it. They do have cornerbacks that are really fast, and that probably gives you more confidence in their ability to recover. And there's some play action or double moves and leaving them in single coverage, and so I think that's it's a high variance game when you're living that way. Like, you're going to give up some huge plays, but I think that's really the best approach for the Raiders on defense this year.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see because we know Patrick Graham wants to do that, especially when he knows that his defense is not good and he needs to create some sort of havoc. We saw that last year with all the cover zero blitzing. But we know Pete Carroll hasn't been that guy. Even when he switched schemes to more of a Fangio scheme, that's kind of a sit back and rush forward type of scheme as well. So we'll see how much Carroll influences it. I think if it's completely Patrick Graham's control and it was all his philosophy, he would send those blitzes like he did last year. So it'll be something interesting to watch out for, and it'll say a lot about the team's philosophy. All right, next question, last question. It looks like a pretty even matchup. What do the Raiders need to win, Brian Boone?
The trenches, I think that's where this game is going to be won and lost. I think these teams, from a skill position standpoint, I'll give Raiders the edge at quarterback for sure. But everywhere else, I think they're pretty even at skill position spots. But the trenches is where, you know, this game's going to be won and lost. So, obviously there's a bunch of other factors that come to winning the game, but I think that one is going to be the biggest one in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trench is obviously huge. Can't turn over the ball on the road, especially against a young team. I think don't give them that sort of boost. They don't need it. I think they're a team that might be prone to some turnovers, learning a new offense, being a bit younger. So don't give them anything easy. And to me, it's about matchups. I mean, I think in this game there are matchups that can be exploited. Who's going to do a better job of taking advantage of those matchups with scheme and hit those opportunities when they come. I think Josh McDaniels has done a pretty good job of it as the offensive coordinator throughout his past. We'll see what Chip Kelly can do in his second stint. All right, that's all we have for you guys today. Excited for the game this week. Make sure you guys listen, subscribe, hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe, leave reviews on Spotify and Apple. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will join you guys live after the very first game.
All right, y'all. See you guys on Sunday.
Later.